Good morning, everyone. I am Utkarsh Agarwal. I editorially lead the BW Auto World community for Business World. And this is the first session of the day. And to set the context, the topic for the session is Driving Green, is the Indian auto industry ready for the green fuel revolution? Now, as you know, as India strives for a sustainable future, the automotive industry stands at a pivotal juncture. And with the rapid advancements in technologies, we must ask questions around, is India ready for a sustainable future, and do we have enough policies and enough development for infrastructure for these technologies to be embraced? For this, I'll go across to my panel. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today here. Nirmal, if I can go across to you, how well do you think is the Indian auto industry equipped to embrace all the new technologies like electric and new hydrogen vehicles?
I think, so thank you very much for inviting me to the panel. Very apt topic, especially around the time when policies are changing in the country. Right? So I believe the auto industry, it's not a new industry, right? We have been here for a really long time. A lot of companies have been in this business for really, really long. And one of the largest employment generators in the country, and all across the world also, right? So I think as an industry, what has happened is some of these companies have dominated the industry for a really long time. With electric and new powertrain technologies coming in, there is a real democratization of this industry that's happening right now, which is a huge opportunity for startups, for new companies to really change what is the current status quo. So here, there was always a barrier for entry in this industry because of some of the powertrain, the amount of capital that was required in powertrain, right? Currently, what has happened is that through electric and even with hydrogen, or many of these new fuels that are coming in, what's happening is that is changing. That barrier of entry is changing. The amount of technology that's going into a vehicle has gone up significantly. As many call it, an electric vehicle is more of a phone on four wheels. So there is a lot of technology that can actually make this industry very modern, very different. Right? That is what is happening. So I really think that many of the old companies may not evolve enough, and a lot of these new entrants who have come in with a lot of technology and capabilities will change and have a completely new playing ground in this.
All right. Mr. Jain, if I can come to you, and if you can share your opening comments around how well do you think is the Indian auto industry equipped to embrace all these new technologies?
See, there are a couple of challenges which auto industry is facing at this point of time, especially in the EV space. One is the charging infrastructure, if I talk about. Or charging also, if I divide it into two parts, one is a fixed battery charging or probably detachable battery charging, and second is a swapping battery. So I think what we expect from the government or probably to have a better guideline in terms of having a standardized ecosystem. Like for example, if today in ICE engine somebody has to fill a fuel, he can go to a HPCL or a BPCL or IOC and he gets the same fuel, and any of the cars across the brands can use the same fuel and they can run the vehicle. But unfortunately in the EV space, the challenge is, like if I talk about swapping station, Sun Mobility is creating its own ecosystem, Smart Batteries, Battery Smart is creating its own ecosystem, Volt Amp is creating their own ecosystem. So basically, only Sun Mobility batteries can be fit only in Sun Mobility ecosystem. So if we have something which is standardized across, which is a common platform where anybody is buying a swapping battery and they can go to any of the stations and they can swap the battery. Something in technology and standardization there is very, very important.
Thank you. You spoke about the battery manufacturing and everything, but we'll come back to that later. Mr. H.S. Bhatia, if you can share your views from the passenger vehicles perspective, how well do you think we are seeing some adoption towards the two-wheeler side and the commercial vehicle side, but the passenger vehicles is still at a pivotal juncture? So what do you will say?
From a capital expenditure and investment point of view, to manufacture a EV two-wheeler, it's much easier and cheaper as compared to a passenger car or a commercial vehicle. and therefore we have not seen even a single person entering the passenger car or the commercial vehicle segment. Any newcomer, no newcomer has come because the entry barrier remains same. Only your moving parts have reduced in case of the engine, but the other investment is the same. So therefore, in terms of EV adoption for passenger cars or commercial vehicles, we will, I am afraid, will still be relying on the old names, whether the Indian manufacturers or the global ones, like Tesla or BYD or the other people who are working on this. There is a Vietnamese company which is now again coming into India. So we will still be relying on the bigger names.
Nikhil, if you can share your views, what do you think from the two-wheeler perspective? Are people and customers buying an electric vehicles? What are their feedback when customers come to buy an electric vehicle?
So from our recent experience, right, as a company who manufactures and sells two-wheelers, to somebody who last week exchanged his petrol car to a friend who bought a ZSEV just for 4 days to see how does it feel to be around in an electric vehicle, right? What all things were there. We coined a term, right? Switching to EV is like you have not, till the time you have not experienced it, you're not going to be convinced that you can move there. Right, from the place of anxiety, questions, range, charging infra, once I was using a vehicle for 4-5 days, it became, okay, planning, okay, organizing my trip, planning and adding plus 1 hour to my basic routine, right, is the difference that happened with me after using an EV for 4 days. From the customer point of view, I think two-wheelers have already reached a place where they are becoming a no-brainer now. Right, again, fluctuations in subsidies and all of that is a separate thing, right? Pricing parity, we do definitely need to achieve that. But more or less we are like now there are vehicles starting from 70,000 that gives you a 60 kilometer, 65 kilometer range to about 1.5 lakh rupees that gives you a 150 kilometer range. Right, so you have got all plethora of products available in the market now. So two-wheelers is almost there. I think another 2-3 years when this will start taking over the traditional sales. For rest of the category, I think passenger vehicle, I believe till the time somebody has not tried it, they're not going to be convinced to buy it. So I request everybody go experience it for 4-5 days, right? And then you'll understand, okay, why do you need to switch to this direction?
Thank you. Mr. Srivastava, if I can come to you from the government's perspective, mostly all the rest of the panelists over here spoke about all the challenges they face. But do you think is the government doing enough to support OEMs in manufacturing electric vehicles, and for customers also any policy initiatives to be taken?
Good morning, everybody. The government we started this narrative from the Niti Aayog in 2017 onwards, and I can see the things unfolding now, and they are kind of unfolding in the direction in which we had envisaged. Initially, people used to say, the industry used to say that the government is moving faster than it is ahead of the industry and the other stakeholders. I don't know, my friends would agree with that. But now, subsequently, now I find that there's a lot which needs to be done, and my co-panelists have spoken about it. The issues are related with the standardization. Now the government has to come out with the issues in which the adoption has to be quicker. Adoption has to be with the people. Government has to tell the consumer the total TCO concept, the total cost of ownership. Now these things have to be promoted, and now that the ball is in the court of the different ministries, different state governments and other stakeholders, the things have to move in tandem and move forward. So the government has taken a lot of policy initiatives. Around 25 different policies were formulated in the beginning, and subsequently as well, I mean, there was tweaking in the FAME 2 and other related policies. But yes, there's a lot needs to be done, and the government has to do a lot of hand-holding, particularly in the direction of, as I said, whether there should be a swapping thing or whether we should go for quick charging, the standardization of the charging guns, which we wanted to have it in 2018 onwards. We have not been able to do it so far. So all these things are lacking. We need to move faster, and the government has a tremendous role in transforming the mobility that we had planned right from 2017 onwards.
All right. Nirmal, you had a smile on your face while Mr. Srivastava had speaking. So, do you agree with him?
No, no. I completely agree when we say that the government has taken a lot of initiatives. I have no doubts on it. I think, yeah, one thing I kind of wanted to discuss was when we talked about standardization of some things, right? Petroleum, comparison to petroleum is not the right thing. Petroleum was controlled in all ways, in price, in the access to it, in everything till a few years back. It's only now that it is at least a little more decentralized, right? It's not really, whether you go to a BPCL, HPCL, all of them, they're all government agencies, I mean, currently not government agencies, they're PSUs, right? So, and there are some more companies which have come in. So, I'm not very sure whether directly controlling everything and standardizing upfront is the best way of getting innovation into the industry, right? Because you should let some of these play out. Otherwise, who's going to invest? If one company has to invest in all batteries, it's not possible for any small company, right? That is almost like ensuring that small companies don't come into the fray. And so my request many times is that we should let some of these play out. The industries, the right kind of technology will come out. I'm sure part of that is what the government has done, right? Government did not introduce this policy upfront saying that everything should be the same. I think that is the right thing to do. I don't think there is anything wrong in that.
Mr. Jain, Mr. Srivastava also pointed out the total cost of ownership, the TCO. In terms of the affordability, battery is almost the half price of the electric vehicles. So what do you think to make electric vehicles more affordable? What should the OEMs and government should be doing?
I think one of the large challenges what we are seeing in the EV space is a retail finance. Unlike probably in a ICE space, be it a two-wheeler, or be it a three-wheeler, or be it a four-wheeler, in a two-wheeler space in ICE, customer walks in the showroom, within 5 minutes he's given approval of finance, and within half an hour he gets the payment also. The dealer gets the payment also. In EV space, in low speed, unfortunately, there are hardly any financiers who are funding. In high speed, yes, there are a couple of financiers who are funding, but still not to that extent, the extent it has gone into ICE space. I think retail financing is going to play a big role in the whole process.
Nikhil, you can majorly explain around this. The batteries cost around half of the electric vehicles. So how can we reduce the cost of electric vehicles to make it more affordable for consumers? And government is pushing for Make in India to manufacture batteries in India. How can we do that? How near and far are we?
I think getting domestic sales is still a little away, another 2-3 years away to get the domestic sales. Whether they'll be at price parity with the imported sales or not, time will tell. One thing that government had already taken initiative was on the subsidy side of it, right? Incentivizing based on the battery capacity so that consumers are getting the product either at an equal cost or an equivalent cost. That is one thing that was already there, but I believe for a little bit more time, the certainty has to keep on playing, right? We have been requesting this, like, let's not change things too fast, too dramatically throughout the course of the time. Let things play out, at least give a 5-year horizon to, even if it is subsidy, even if it is 5,000 rupees as a direct benefit transfer to the consumers. But that has to be there. When he mentioned about the financing, we faced a similar challenge over the last 3 years of the journey. Ended up creating our own NBFC to fund via our dealers. We requested in a couple of sessions, a couple of months back, we also requested maybe EVs can be given priority sector lending status. Right? That is something that will even push banks and NBFCs to start pushing finance, these organizations, right, to start pushing financing for the two-wheelers. I can understand the perspective of the financiers, right, because they do not have certainty on the product life, product quality right now. They do not know what the aftermarket value will be. What if somebody defaults? What if the product doesn't work and the consumer stops paying the EMI? Right, so they are conservative on that side, but I think instead of 30,000 rupees subsidy, 5,000 rupees per kilowatt DBT with a priority sector lending that reduces the cost of the EMI will be a good push to the entire market. That is something that we foresee. Okay, this can be a catalyst for a little period of time. And on the cost of the batteries, I believe it's already decently low now. Another 2-3 years when we see that the pricing will be at such level when we still are about 25% premium to the traditional petrol product, right, in a two-wheeler category if it is apple-to-apple comparison. Can we close that pricing right now? Maybe not. 3-4 years down the line, once the scale hits that level, we have domestic cell production and all of that, that might happen. For the time, priority setting lending, DBT-based subsidies would be a great help to offset that cost.
Mr. Bhatia, if you can explain from the customer's perspective, the electric vehicles are costly, if we agree or not. So to make it cheaper, what can we do? What measures can we take?
So today, there are two major parts into EV. Let's say two-wheeler, we'll start with two-wheelers. One is the engine part and one is the body and the other components. Talking about the battery, like Mr. Srivastava mentioned about standardization, my comment would be that like we have now the same charger for all the mobile phones, that is the standardization we are talking about. Which means today if you buy a mobile phone, you don't necessarily have to buy a charger. So you save that money, number one. Number two, the e-waste generated by the last charger wire and the pin is now like you don't need to. So you are not only reducing the e-waste, but you are actually reducing the cost of ownership of a mobile. And I'm specifically talking of the normal mobile, which is 2,000-3,000 rupees, for example. For that customer, 100 rupees is a charge. If Mr. Srivastava is talking about a similar standardization, I am for it. Because that will, what will happen is your battery is standardized, for example, or the size of the battery, and therefore the space that every EV manufacturer has to provide in the vehicle would be the same. So which actually means that the battery swapping becomes much, much easier. There could be many manufacturers of a battery, but the customer need not therefore buy a battery along with the vehicle, which means his cost of ownership goes down from the stage one, which is when he is buying. And after that, swapping becomes much easier, and I think the swapping, the battery swapping will take off once the batteries are at least common in size, if not the other things. That's one. Also, when we talk of total cost of ownership, look at both the aspects. Your battery is not there, your vehicle cost goes down. This is point one. Second, after 3 years or 4 years when the battery is done with, and you go and buy a new battery, in the meanwhile, you have, let's say, used this battery for 20,000 kilometers or something. So you're saying this 20,000 rupee battery has done 20,000 kilometers, so my cost is only 1 rupee, for example, just for an example. And suppose now the battery cost has gone down. So for example, we have seen that in the last 2 years, the lithium battery has dropped about 20%. In the next 3-4 years, as the Goldman Sachs report says, it will further drop by another 30 to 40%. If that happens, not only your cost of ownership in the first phase goes down, but when you are replacing the battery, then you calculate that as compared to a IC engine vehicle, what kind of petrol I was using over the last 3 years, and now what is the cost of replacement of a battery. If that battery, which was costing 40,000, is now available at 20,000 or 25,000, or through swapping, then the total cost of ownership, either at buying or in usage, goes down. That is where, apart from all the other reasons of ecosystem growth, the adoption will be much faster. Because like it was mentioned that there is a 25% gap between an IC engine two-wheeler and a e-two-wheeler. That price can only be bridged mainly by if we solve the battery problem. For the other components, there are lots and lots of initiatives by the government, and we have seen so many component manufacturers now. They are making locally, and once these local, the motors, everything is being made locally these days. Everybody is investing. Once that happens, probably the vehicle per se will also go down. So if the battery goes down, and here the vehicle price also goes down, and then the replacement battery price also goes down, either because of the lithium drop or because of the swapping, then you would see a much, much faster adoption, and then probably the target of 50% of two-wheelers being EV by 2030 is really achievable.
Before I come to Mr. Srivastava, I'll go to Nikhil. You had a response to Mr. Bhatia. Around the battery swapping
On
part.
this battery swapping,
yeah.
on this battery swapping standardization, there was a draft policy document introduced about 8 odd months back. At that time, the document was well drafted in the sense that the dimensions were standardized, the protocol was standardized, and the connector pin was standardized. If we talk about the innovation part of it, it is all inside that, right? If somebody can pack more energy in the same dimension, that's innovation, right? Somebody can deliver cheaper kilowatt hour, that's innovation, right? Somebody can make it safe, that's innovation. From the OEM perspective, that also made sense in a way that I do not know what dimension I'm supposed to do at the time of design if I do not have an understanding on that. Right? Because again, it's not a generalistic volume that I create, okay, itna bada space bana diya, and any battery or every battery somebody can come and plug it into it. Technically, yes, there are challenges because somebody's on 48 volt architecture, somebody's on 60, then 72, then 90, right? Different platforms, different architectures. Let's say, if I have designed a vehicle that can deliver 90 kmph top speed, but a swappable battery that is put into my vehicle does not support that kind of C rating, right? How would my vehicle behave in that case? So it is a very integrated system. You cannot keep batteries and vehicles aside, right? It has to be ground up, developed together. Somebody has to take that initiative on a much larger scale. The current swapping market that is designed is purely on the e-rickshaw market, right? Two-wheelers is like less than 2% of the entire space. It's purely catering to that e-rickshaw space. That's why a generalistic dimension or an open space, you have an open space to put 1, 2, 3 batteries. How do this pan out? See, again, the top tier players in two-wheeler market right now have a fixed battery architecture because batteries are structural members inside the vehicle. Right? We designed a motorcycle. We also realized that we have to have a fixed battery architecture. If I have to go at a top speed of 95 kmph and I have to have kind of rigidity and stability in the product, I cannot be variable with almost 40 kg of load inside my vehicle. So there are tricks and challenges, technical challenges involved with it. How would things perform? How are things integrated together? I believe for low speed or a closed community, low speed e-rickshaw space, battery swapping is right now working fine. It will work fine because in low speed category, more or less vehicles have similar part sharing ecosystems. How would it pan out in a high speed or a high performance mainstream product? It is yet to be figured out.
So Srivastava, you heard all the panelists over here. Battery swapping is majorly possible for two-wheelers only, but that's not an option for passenger vehicles or commercial vehicles. So how do you see this?
Besides battery swapping, I would say a few more things what my fellow panelists have spoken. Seeing this and taking it forward for the last 5-6 years, I have a lot of things to say. Why there are no financiers? Because the financial institutions do not understand the technology. I'm making this statement. They don't understand. I mean, a vehicle, whether it is a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, or a four-wheeler, or a commercial vehicle, the body is the same, everything is same. Powertrain is replacing the internal combustion engine, and the fuel is different. None of the vehicle comes with the fuel, whereas the electric vehicle is coming with a battery which will be lasting X number of cycles or Y number of years. So this is to be communicated to the financiers. What you guys are saying is meaning the same thing. I'm putting it in a very concise and very, very precise words. So these things need to be communicated to all the stakeholders. I agree, the government should have been at the forefront. They should have been taking it forward. But then look at the draft policy of the swapping policy. What the kind of lobbying which it had. And not from the startups, even from the leading players, that the draft has not got converted to a final policy. So these are the issues which all the stakeholders have to take into forward. This provides a tremendous opportunity for the country, for the automobile sector. We are the top manufacturer of the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and agricultural automobile products, tractors, etc. We are third, fourth, we were fifth, became now fourth in terms of the commercial passenger vehicle production in the number of things. I mean, there's so much of the market which is available in the country. I mean, it's a challenge for the OEMs, for the startups, and everybody to make use of this market, to start from here and then take a leading position in the world. We should not lose this thing I have been telling repeatedly. We should not lose this opportunity. None of the major good quality passenger vehicles were designed or developed in this country. But look, now the initiatives are there. Some of the domestic players, everybody knows the name also, I can name them, are now starting the original EVs, not developing it from the platform of the ICEs, the born EVs, the word which has been raised. Now we have to have the born EVs, and even in the two-wheeler segment also, the leading brand in the ICE two-wheeler could not launch its electric vehicle even after the prototype was tested 2 years back, 2.5 years back. It is coming now in the market. So these are the things which need to be taken into account. It's a challenge for the OEMs, for the industry, for the government, and for the consumer as well. Why should a consumer adopt EV unless he knows that it is a total cost of ownership concept, what you were talking? That it will pay in due course of time. The vehicle is coming with the fuel, I mean kind of a fuel tank which will go on for 20,000 kilometers. So this thing has to be conveyed, this is to be conveyed, and they should understand these things. There are many such issues. Some of the points which were said about the price. Now the price between an internal combustion engine vehicle and an electric vehicle cannot be bridged. For the simple reason the electric vehicle is coming with the fuel. You take out the battery and then you compare the price. It is lower than the internal combustion engine because internal combustion engine has 2,000 parts and the electric motor has 20 parts. So the price of an electric vehicle without the battery would certainly be lower than the internal combustion engine vehicle. So these are the finer points which one has to understand, which one has to convey to all the stakeholders, and all the stakeholders have to speak about it for the betterment of the environment, for the pollution and the transition which should take place in terms of the mobility.
Mr. Srivastava, you made very prominent statements over here. Nikhil, I can come to you. What lessons can we learn from the world? We have had electric vehicles in India since decades, but nothing has been done prominently. We've been seeing the push since past 3-4 years, but nothing has been done. So Tesla has been there in outside countries. So what lessons can we learn from the world?
I actually think that we need not learn a lot from the world, really, honestly, right? I'm not being jingoistic about saying that. What I'm saying is that India is different. The context in India is different, right? The population, the amount of travel that happens, the last mile travel that is happening in India is very different from what happens in a Western country. So in an America, maybe a Tesla makes sense. Maybe the population density is so low, the number of people who are traveling is lesser. But in India, I think the two-wheelers and three-wheelers, the commercial vehicles being in the forefront of electrification, I think that itself is what is, that is a real point, right? I think China is a place where we can learn from. May not be from the West a lot, right? Because I understand that we need electrification in personal cars, but if you just look at the amount of time that it needs to, or the number of kilometers that a car needs to travel to essentially break even, not just on cost, being on the amount of, essentially an electric car is not always considered green because it needs to cover so many kilometers to cover the same amount of carbon emissions that you have, right? So, but in the case of a last mile mobility, it is not so because the number of kilometers traveled by a personal car is way lower than a shared vehicle which is generally traveling, right? So I actually think that we are doing a good job at that. The adoption on the two-wheeler and three-wheeler side is what is showing that. The next point really is to make sure that they reach that potential. And even after this adoption that we are talking about, it is still a smaller percentage there, right? Getting that percentage higher is one of the things that we should do. Automatically, when you see that a person, a costly car need not be subsidized, in my opinion. Right? That is not what the government money should be for. The government money should be to ensure that the mass adopts to electric and ensures that, I think that is where largely the policies have also moved. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that the policies or the product development, most of that, it's not just about blindly copying from the West. It's more about understanding the Indian context, which is slightly different, or I would rather say largely different, and going for that. So public money or any subsidy or any policy is generally should be spent on things which are closer to mass transit and also shared transport. That's my view.
Mr. Bhatia, you're also the manufacturing partner for DAEWOO in India. So if you can explain to us from your perspective, how are you looking at the Indian market for this transition? What sectors, what challenges are you facing?
So the Indian EV market is in an organic growth state, and the numbers are growing very, very fast. 22, the numbers were just about 1.5 lakh, and last year it is 8.5 lakhs. No, it was 1.5, then it became 6 lakhs, and now 8.5 lakhs. And by 2030, it is going to be something like 12 million or probably 14 million. The share of the EV in the total two-wheeler rose from 1% to 5% last year, and is expected to go to about 40 to 50% by 2030. So there is a lot of excitement in the space, and the total EV industry is on an organic growth state. So obviously there is, in such a number, there is a room for a lot of people to, build their businesses. And there are opportunities therefore, and there are challenges which some of them have been highlighted by this panel. And overall, we are very excited that this industry adoption is growing very fast. The ecosystem is building up. It is not an overnight job. The ecosystem is building up. The private players are doing their bit. The government is doing their bit. And overall, if you see, the ecosystem is building up. Coming to the government side, I would say just a couple of things. One is that like the government is doing for many other industries, especially electronics and mobiles and now laptops and computers, there should be a PLI or a manufacturing incentive for the EV component industry. Not necessarily the EV manufacturers, but for the EV component makers. If the EV manufacturers are making components, then the PLI is applicable to them as well. But essentially, it should be for the EV components. Because today, most of the components are imported. And we pay duty and we bring it here. And we kind of assemble it only, So there, we must give a lot of boost and support to the EV component industry. Once that happens and India becomes a global hub or a domestic manufacturer for EV components, you'll see most of the problems will be taken care of. That is point one where I would look for government support. The other support also is when the consumer registers it. So like today, few states are giving the registration incentive and subsidy and few are not. So there is a lot of inconsistency with regard to for example, the FAME 2, which is now expiring on 31st March, and we are not very sure of the FAME 3. Then I believe this budget, the outlay has been reduced by about 40%. Then there is no consistency. It's there, then it is stopped and something like that. I know some people misused it, so I'm not blaming our own fraternity for that. But so there has to be a consistency in the policy. The government should stay outside, give an outside support, see the growth of the industry, whether components, whether the consumers from registration point of view. If you do that and let the ecosystem evolve, then you will see this industry adoption rate will be even more faster. And that is the opportunity that we sense, and that is what excites DAEWOO to be in India.
Mr. Mr. Srivastava, do you think India is different from other countries? And if it is different, what can we do to increase EV adoption?
Yes, this is the point we used to make to the people, that we have 80%, more than 80% of automobile production in two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So India is different. And in fact, if you look at it, different geographies have different kind of mobility patterns. Europe is different, US is different, the kind of car usage is different in US and it is different in Europe. It is much different in India. We use our car for 5 to 6% of the time only. Our cars are mostly parked in the garages or on the roads. So this is certain. So any stakeholder who is in this ecosystem has to keep in mind that it cannot be that it can be compared with the other things. Firstly, and secondly, your last question about the Tesla and the other global players, I must say that we need not ape or we need not follow any patterns from them. They are not coming to India for the obvious reason, because India is different. They are wanting certain kind of other maybe concessions, or what should I say, from the authorities, because India is different and they need different kind of groundwork, they need to do different kind of efforts to be successful in India. So the India, in terms of the consumption, it is different, the mindset, it is different, and a major reason why the four-wheeler passenger vehicle adoption is not probably as we had planned earlier in the Niti Aayog, that the way it should have been growing, it is not. Certainly 5% is a good figure, and 2030 we were expecting even much more than what you guys are now looking at, and even I find it that now the projections are not going the way we modeled it, we prepared the models in Niti Aayog at that point of time. For the simple reason, there is no acceptable product in the Indian four-wheeler passenger vehicle segment which is acceptable to the consumer's mindset in India. You have to understand, and you have to design a project which meets the requirements. There are products which are very close to the Indian mindset, and now even the global players are also coming out with their different kind of models which are not all that in high volumes in the other geographies, but they are different in Indian geographies. But Indian two-wheeler industry should come out with something which is to the Indian requirement, to the Indian masses. We use our scooters, we use our two-wheelers for very short distances, and in a day we don't move more than 20 to 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers on a two-wheeler, whether it is a large segment of the two-wheelers are driven by the ladies or by the both sexes. So they also do not drive it for very large distances. All these things cannot be kept aside while moving and taking forward things in India. Other point is that our mobility patterns are different. Our usage of the public transport is also different, and we use public transport in a different way. The kind of, you go to the countryside and the way people move in a three-wheeler or the tempos, so-called tempos, it's a totally different, and there is no enumeration of that. We have not yet went into it that how many people do make travel on those vehicles and how many people need mobility needs. So that is where probably the players need to put in some effort as to how the countryside India moves and what are their requirements in terms of the mobilities. We are only focusing on a very small segment of the Indian mobility market and making our policies, whereas the potential is huge. It's a tremendous potential which is lying underneath. With the latent demand or the latent potential, I would say, about the mobility is tremendous. So the India is certainly different from what the other countries are, and we have to have the products, the policies, and the charging infrastructure, the kind of the range anxieties which the Indian consumer has is different from the range anxiety which the US customer has. So we have to keep into mind all these things. I mean, I have raised so many issues about it which need to be handled, which need to be tackled by the stakeholders.
Thank you so much. Nikhil, if I can come to you, the jobs have become the center of attraction once again in India. So from an OEM perspective, do you think, do you have enough skilled work power for these new technologies like electric vehicles and hydrogen also coming up? That's also one of the concerns.
For the space we are operating in right now, we are building up the skills. right? We train people, we upskill them, we understand, okay, if you're on an assembly line, it's no more an engine assembly, right? It's more on an electronics and electrical driven electromechanical assembly, so to say. So, and ITI peoples are upskilled internally, right, to fulfill that demand. So we are doing our part on that side. On hydrogen, on all of that, again, not my core area of expertise right now. So I am not very sure about it. But yes, for electric two-wheelers, I believe there is sufficient upskilling happening right now, either directly or indirectly by all the stakeholders, right? I believe for three-wheelers, he'll be a better person to say. In battery manufacturing, people have upskilled, people have, more and more people are getting into this profession now. Yes, there is a challenge, but it is not that big a challenge. It is a trainable skill. It's not something that you need some ground level shake up on the education system or anything like that. It's a trainable skill. So you just have to have people, you have to have work for them, and you have to have that mindset that, okay, we need to give them certain know-hows so that they can also learn and move on. In our last 3-4 years of journey, I believe we have more than 300 people have joined us, moved on, moved to next jobs, learned, right? So all these things are happening. We are also hiring from the, different companies where they are already pre-scaled. So yes, it is an evolving ecosystem.
Mr. Jain, do you think we have enough skilled man-force for these new technologies like electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cells?
See, as Nikhil said, this is something which is evolving. At this point of time, yes, we don't have that skilled manpower. Is it? Yeah, but it's not that difficult a technology also when you need a very, very strong technology or probably expertise to learn it. Like, largely if I talk about the EV space, it's a two-wheeler industry, the three-wheeler industry where the transition is happening very, very fast. In three-wheeler space, rather the inflection point we have reached the inflection point where everybody is transitioning from diesel and CNG to an electric business. Similarly, in two-wheeler space also, if I talk about, largely two-wheeler, we have to divide the categories into two categories. One is the personal travel, and the second is the commercial travel. I think in two-wheeler space, with the delivery companies like Zomato's and Swiggy's and Blinkits of the world, they are giving a big boost to the two-wheeler industry. That commercial adoption is happening very, very fast in the two-wheeler space. Coming to your question of understanding, see, here skill, manpower, there are two ways to look at it. One is the manpower who can run this, and second is the awareness about the product. The challenge what we are seeing in the EV industry at this point of time is a lot of people are not happy with the EV product because they don't have knowledge about it. They don't know how to charge, when to charge, how much speed they should run at. People run at a speed of 60, 70 and they expect a high range coming from the product. So more challenges pertaining to the knowledge of the product, to the consumer as well. Like they've been using ICE for years together, so when they are used to that, they know how to manage that.
Mr. Bhatia, government has also been pushing for hydrogen fuel cells. How do you see the future of hydrogen fuel cells, or how near or far are we? Electric mobility is already staggering at the current times. So where do you see hydrogen fuel cells?
So for any fuel to be used in any kind of electric vehicle, actually for any vehicle actually, you have to look at 3-4 things. First, the availability, which is the first A. Second is the adaptability, whether you can use that fuel across your vehicle, all the vehicles, or it is applicable only for one set of applicables. So for example, hydrogen, since you mentioned, hydrogen has a very high density and also has a mass. So in that sense, this fuel cannot be used for a two-wheeler in the current state. It is only used for commercial vehicles. Across the world, even now, Reliance is putting a lot of money and converting all their commercial vehicles into the hydrogen fuel. They are also talking to Ashok Leyland, they are working on something. As I said, first is availability, second is adaptability or the application. The third is the affordability, whether this fuel is affordable for the category of that vehicle. So if there is a fuel which is expensive, then don't expect the three-wheeler or the two-wheeler guys to, put his money, because then the overall cost of the cost goes up. And fourth, I think is the affluence. You may develop a fuel or you may discover a fuel, but what about the affluence? What about the discharge or the disposal of the e-waste? So therefore, when you decide on any fuel, you have to look at all these 4 factors, and then only you can decide whether this fuel is for the future or not. whether this fuel will be adaptable or not. So therefore, hydrogen can be used only for commercial vehicles. At this moment, no cars are running on hydrogen. People are working on it, but currently none. And two-wheelers obviously not. So therefore, you will have to have different set of fuels for different applications and different vehicles. One more point, not related to your question, but we were talking about the charging stations and also about the issues there for consumers face and stuff like that. There is also an issue related to the sustainability, you know. So I was in one of the forums and we had proposed that if you are putting up charging stations, wherever, whether in the upcountry or in the cities, and if they are getting charged by the electrical current which is available, and if that electric current is, for example, being produced by the coal burning, then where is the sustainability? Where is the environment? I mean, you are producing it one way, the old way, and you're putting it in the new way, then what does it mean? It actually means nothing. I'm saying from the sustainability or the renewable energy point of view. So therefore, for the charging stations, for example, if a kind of charging stations are made which run only on solars, and these are, for example, placed across all the highways and dhabas and everywhere, you know, and this job is given to private individuals as like your pencharwalas of yesterday, for example, or these kind of people, and they put up one kiosk and they charge. I'm not saying technically how much time will it take to produce such a kiosk, but ultimately if your charging stations can be put up, it will not only generate lots and lots of employment and business opportunity for the small guys, but also really work on the renewable part or the sustainable part, which today is somewhere missing. We are talking of EV, but we are not talking of how to charge it. Whether it is coming from the same thought process or it is coming from a traditional energy source, then the purpose is defeated or half done only.
All your questions are outside the stage. I'm sure they would be happy to answer. Thank you so much all for joining us.